guys, I got a question today on an email, and the question was, how do I get out of a slump? Now, this is a topic that's thrown around between parents a lot, between coaches, and we always want to find out, how do we help a kid that's not doing well or we think is in a slump? Now, before I even get into what we can do to help, I want to make sure that we're not helping unnecessarily or actually hurting the player. So the first thing is, we need to understand what a slump is and what a slump isn't. Now, you guys already know that baseball is an extremely tough sport. Great players that hit 300, are going to fail 70% of the time. There's an awful lot of failure in baseball. Hitting especially is one of the toughest things to do in all of sports. So we have to understand that first off. The worst thing you can do for a player is, after a player hasn't gotten a few hits in maybe one game or two games, is to start tinkering with them. Because we've all heard the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we can't tell after a few at-bats, or even a game, or two games, if something's actually broke. We don't want to just start tinkering with things, because once we start changing and changing and changing, if we're not changing the right things and we're doing it unnecessarily, we could actually be hurting the player instead of helping the player. And that's bad news. That's going to lead to more and more games where we're not getting hits. So that's the first thing, is to understand the slump. Now, we've realized that a player has gone a while and he hasn't played well. He's gone 4, 5, 6 games in a row. And we say, okay, we need to start looking into this more. The first thing you want to do as a player or as a coach is look at where the batted balls are being hit or what they're doing. So if we're hitting a lot of pop-ups to the infield, for a right-handed hitter, if we're popping up to second base a lot, or a lefty's popping up to shortstop, that could be a clue as to what's going on. If we're hooking balls a lot, or if we're hitting everything to our pull side, if we're fouling a lot of balls back, if we're swinging and missing a lot. You want to gather this information, and a lot of times that'll give you a clue into what could be happening in the swing that's making that happen. So that's the first thing you want to do, is realize what's going on, what type of action is on the ball. If there's a lot of hook spin or a lot of top spin, that'll give us some clues. After we've looked into that, we go on to our second thing, which is pitch selection. So we need to make sure we're swinging at good pitches. You guys all know that. But what happens a lot is, if things aren't going well, it could just be because you're swinging at bad pitches. If a player swings a lot of pitches up in the zone and he pops out 4 times in the game, some coaches might look at that and say, all right, we have to correct something in the swing. Maybe he's dropping his back shoulder too much, or whatever it may be. A lot of coaches might think it's an uppercut swing. But the truth of the matter is, if we're swinging at balls up at our chest, it's very hard to get on top of that ball. We might have a great swing at it, and we just can't get on top because the pitch is too high. So we don't want to start changing things because our pitch selection is poor. We're going to have a tough time hitting the ball well if we're not swinging at good pitches in the zone. So that's the second thing, is to look at pitch selection. If you look at pitch selection and you say, we're swinging at great pitches, or our player is swinging at great pitches, and he's still not having success, now we go another step further. And now this is where we finally get into the mechanics. Now, the first 2 things to look at are probably the easiest. Mechanics is something that can be tricky and can be difficult sometimes, because the ways of thinking about hitting have changed over the years, and not everybody knows exactly what's supposed to happen. People are learning new things all the time. So when we get into the mechanics aspect of it, that's kind of where we come in to the equation. You know, my job when I work with players is, we look at mechanics, we talk about a whole lot of things, but when it comes down to, all right, we need to change mechanics, we start to really bear down on mechanics. And we've studied a lot of swings, and we understand what moves could be contributing to certain things. So if a right-handed hitter is popping up a lot of balls to second base, well, it could be that we're getting around balls and cutting across the zone, and our bat's not in the zone for a long time. We're slicing across like this, and that's going to cause a lot of pop-ups to the opposite field side. It could be because there's too much weight on the backside, and we're not getting down and we're getting around balls. What happens is, if you have a lot of weight in your back leg, your knee's not going to be able to work downward properly. So our hands are going to get out around balls. When we get out around balls, a lot of times we want to cut back across. That's a big problem that we've noticed with younger players and players that don't really know exactly how to transfer their weight properly. Or they've been taught to keep all that weight on the back leg. And sometimes teachings aren't correct. A lot of times you'll hear something like squish the bug, and you've heard it since you were a little kid. But in reality, you don't squish the bug. That's a very poor move with the backside. That's a spinning motion, which is going to cause our hands to get around. Now that's just one example. There's tons of things that could happen in the swing. But our job is to find that and help you, and not only help you get out of it, but explain it to you. Okay, this is what's happening with your swing, and this is what's going to happen if you do this type of swing, so that you know next time that we're not around and maybe you're in a slump, you can start to look at your own swing and understand what's going on. And that's really our job. We want to pass on our knowledge to you so that you can become your own hitting coach, because let's face it, your hitting coach is not always going to be around. He's not going to be at every game with you. Sometimes you've got to figure it out on your own. And if you have the knowledge, it's going to make it easier, and you're going to snap out of stuff that much quicker. So that's what I would do with slumps. Look at it in those steps. Don't rush to conclusions, and don't think you're in a slump because you haven't gotten a hit in a few days. Thanks again. I hope that helped. Keep sending your questions in. I love answering them. Thanks.